Welcome to the Hearts Entwined podcast. In this podcast, we'll be having discussions around the secrets which attract lasting, healthy, fulfilling relationships, creating a healthy mindset, and what women should know and understand about men. Introducing your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts, relationship expert, trainer, speaker, and best-selling author of the Cupid's Bow technique. Lyn's mission is to have a positive impact in reducing divorce, domestic violence, and suicide.
Welcome to the Hearts Entwined podcast. This is your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts. And today, listeners, I've got the wonderful Suzanne Noble. She's the co-founder and producer of Sex Advice for Seniors. So I was really excited to get Suzanne on the show because I really love the topic and the subject. And I think it's going to be such an amazing conversation. So welcome to the podcast, Suzanne.
Thank you, Lyn. Thanks for inviting me.
You're so welcome. So, Suzanne, just tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what's led you to be doing what you're doing around this topic.
Well, I've had an interest in sex for a while. That's an understatement. And when I had, like many people, I was married for 12 years, the last 4 of which I was celibate. And I came out of that relationship and I met someone at the time who was a very sexual person, and he led me down the path of sin. He was into all sorts of things, and I hadn't really experienced anything other than pretty much vanilla sex up until that point. Although I'd had some experiences, like so many people in my 20s, messed around a bit with women and had lots of guys and just, typical kind of young woman of that time. And yeah, he led me into this world of all sorts of alternativeness. And so I spent most of my 40s really in a very heightened sexual state, I would say. And I really at that point, I made it my mission in my 40s to manifest every fantasy I'd ever had. And I did. I did everything that you could possibly think of, and a lot of things that you probably have never thought about. And I did them all. And I really enjoyed myself. And I would always advise women that if you suddenly find yourself single in your 40s, don't jump into a long-term relationship, because you are super hot property and people will find you incredibly desirable, because generally at that age, you're just reaching the end of the time that you can procreate. And I don't know about you, but certainly my body was definitely telling me, this is it. You've only got a few more years left, and then you're not going to be able to make babies anymore. And something around that just kind of, went a bit mental. Anyway, I got to 50 and the menopause hit. And honestly, that was like a train crash. And I didn't know what was going on, hot flushes, putting on weight, feeling very just unattractive, undesirable, everything really. At the time I turned 50, I was going out with a 33-year-old guy who was super hot, and he was great. We were having a great time. And then as soon as the menopause really took hold of my body, I just thought it wasn't fair to him to have to put up with me in that state. So we broke up after a few years, and really my 50s were kind of I had a few relationships, but I put all that kind of mostly the sexy stuff behind me. Went quite vanilla again. And I really, I just kind of grieved a bit about all of the lost, I thought, well, I guess this is what happens in your 50s. You just kind of get on with it and find some other things that you enjoy doing. And didn't really thought, well, I had my good sexy years. So that's that. And then I turned 60, and then I was kind of almost at the end of the menopause. And then I met Peter, my co-founder in Sex Advice for Seniors, who'd come out of a very long relationship And he'd approached me a couple of years earlier on Facebook, of all places, where he thought I looked smiley and fun. And I was going out with someone at the time. And then Valentine's Day came around this year and I wasn't. So I posted on Facebook, oh, happy Valentine's Day. I'm single now. And he said, oh, you're single. You know, do you want to go out? And he was somebody, and we just started going out. And then we hit it off. And then I found that I was with somebody who really had wanted to experiment sexually in the way that I kind of already had. But I was kind of thinking, well, what would happen if I re-engaged with this at 60?
Yeah.
20 years have gone by now, and what's this going to be like? So I sort of have been dipping into it with him again, looking at doing a few alternative things and just having fun and having good sex again, which is nice. And I've really been enjoying that. And it's different. Don't get me wrong. It's not like my 40s. I would call it that the super juicy time of my life, but it's fun. And so he said, why don't we do something about sex? And he comes from a journalism background. I come from a PR comms writing background as well. And we just thought, yeah, why not? And I suggested a podcast because I thought it would be discreet. And I've done a bit of radio in the past, and he's done a bit of telly stuff, and he's got a nice voice and I've got an interesting voice. And so we've done that. And then you couldn't really make it up, because one of the things about doing anything in life is about timing. And the week that we launched our podcast was the week that Emma Thompson movie came out, Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, which was about a 61-year-old woman who's had a sexless life or sexually unsatisfying life, and hires a younger sex worker to teach her about pleasure. And so suddenly the media were looking for spokespeople. And because I was being very visible with our podcast, they kept asking me and Peter to do interviews. And so suddenly we found we were in The Sun, we were in The Independent, we were in The Telegraph the ot's week, we were in Woman's Own. I mean, we've only been going a few months. And then my son, who works in digital marketing, said, why don't you start a TikTok channel, Mum? Because with your purple hair and your weird voice, I think people would really like it. And so Peter and I started that. And we've now got like 21,500 followers and over 2 million views. It's insane.
Wow. I'm impressed. That's fun.
I know, it's nuts. It's really quite nuts. And it just goes to show that sometimes, without even thinking about it, you hit a nerve, right? And I think we have.
Such an interesting story. And so in terms of obviously rediscovering, that you can still have plenty of passion, sex, and a great partnership and lifestyle, and enjoy yourselves, just as much, if not more, in your senior years when it comes to engaging in all sorts of sexual activity. How do you think that's different to your 40s?
In multiple ways. Even though I really enjoy sex, I'm not driven by it in the same way I was in my 40s. I would say that in my 40s, people always say, like, it's like a monkey on your back. It was just it just felt like it was a constant presence, my need to just have sex, just sexual encounters of whatever sort. Got myself into some kind of semi-dangerous situations, which,
right.
Yeah, but I'm fine, I'm fine. But I don't have that same drive as I did back then. So when I'm in sexual situations, I feel sexual. But generally, most of the time, I'm not walking around thinking, when am I next going to have sex? Like I was in my 40s. And I'm not so focused as I was in my 40s on whether or not I have an orgasm, because in my 40s, it was pretty easy to have an orgasm, if I'm honest. And in my 60s, a little bit more challenging. And so I've stopped thinking, how am I going to get there? Am I going to get there? I just think, oh, this is all feeling very nice. And I might get there. And then again, I might not. So
you can still enjoy yourself regardless. Yeah.
just have to enjoy the journey. As I say, just enjoy the journey.
And so would you say, I mean, I don't know what sort of situation you're in now in terms of, the love life you've got with your current partner, but I mean, would you say previously that, in your 40s, and I think a lot of women do want to come out of long relationships, go through sort of a bit of a promiscuous period?
Definitely. And I certainly was one of those people. I had a few other things. The guy that led me down the garden path, he died. And so I'd come out of this long-term relationship, then met this, guy, then he died. And honestly, at that point, I was just ready to just have fun. I just was not ready to be in any sort of long-term committed relationship. I just was really over it. So I made a very determined effort to really detach myself emotionally from most of the relationships that I was in, and I got pretty good at that. And I think as well, being in your 40s when the estrogen is starting to, disappear a bit, it's much easier to disentangle yourself from some of the intense emotions that you may feel when you're younger. So again, it was easier for me to have those casual relationships without the sense of attachment that I felt with every single guy that I'd slept with in my 20s, which was, every time I'd have sex in my 20s, I'd convince myself I was in love with this person and this was going to happen. And now I'm much more cautious, if you like, about people. I mean, Peter and I have a pretty open relationship. We're very honest with each other. I'm not really a great fan of monogamy. I've kind of gone off it over the years. I see that sometimes when people spend too long together, one of the first thing that goes in their relationship is the sexual component, especially if they become very domestic. And, it all becomes about who empties the dishwasher and did you do the washing, and well, are you going to fold the sheets, and what are we having for dinner tonight? I just none of that. I don't get turned on by any of that. So I prefer to keep things quite separate living arrangements. And I'm financially able to do that, and I recognize that's a privilege that I have. But yeah, I don't really want to live with anybody for this foreseeable future. So yeah, I think now I feel much clearer in my head about where sex fits into my overall life, which is, it's a part of it. It's not like the whole thing.
Yeah. And I suppose for me, and this is just my own personal opinion, I do prefer to be in a monogamous relationship. I've never wanted or had the desire to not be, for me, that is just who I am. But so I really find this quite interesting and fascinating. But the question I suppose I'd like to ask is then, is there a part of you that's afraid of getting hurt? And that's why you, I suppose, don't want to be in a monogamous relationship, because then you're not going to become so emotionally attached. Or is it just purely because, you don't see the need and the want and the desire anymore?
I think there's a number of things. I mean, yeah, we're all scared of getting hurt. So probably I'm not different from anyone else like that. But I also think that one of the challenges when you enter the world of kink is that you become you just become a bit of a kinky person. and so part of being a kinky person might be that you have a relationship with your partner, but you bring other people into the relationship to kind of spice things up a bit. And that's one way. And that's kind of, there's still an element of monogamy kind of about that, in that, you're still like what I'm very clear about is I'm not polyamorous. That I'm very clear about. Like, I'm very much about having somebody that I've got an emotional relationship with, like Peter, who I would say is my primary partner. And I would say that my other things, I can do the casual sex thing without feeling anything really other than, oh, that felt quite nice. And there's always an excitement when you meet somebody new sexually. Let's face it, I don't think anybody on this earth would say that there's not excitement when you just have some frizz-on with somebody and you have something that goes on.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because it's just exciting, right? And it's hard to maintain that level of excitement with a long-term partner. Now, what you get with a long-term partner, of course, is the other great stuff. It's like you get to know each other's bodies. You get to know what makes each other happy. You get to, if you're open with your partner, which I wasn't particularly when I was younger, but I certainly am now, I have conversations about, like, what do you fantasize about? Like, what are you thinking about? What would you really like to do? And then so you can have those kind of really nice conversations. And listen, in some monogamous relationships, those conversations are as far as it goes. You might just fantasize together about stuff that you kind of would like to do, but never step over the precipice to doing it. And you could still get super turned on by that. Just the thought of something exciting, right?
Yeah.
So being kinky, you can be kinky within a monogamous relationship, 100%. But I do think it requires if you're a sexual person, it requires a huge amount of imagination on both sides to keep that spiciness alive, or you can very quickly become a person who just settles into a routine where sex is just another part of your relationship. It's something you do. It's very nice. It feels very good, but it's just a bit predictable. And when it gets a bit predictable for me, I also, the other thing which Peter and I spoke about in one of our podcasts, which is coming up, is the fact that most of the women I know of 50 plus, if they have kids, if they haven't had kids, whatever, this is the time of life where often they're really seizing opportunities. So they're being creative, they're doing podcasts, they're writing, they're going off traveling, they're doing all this amazing stuff. They're going, this is my time. I can now do this stuff. And most of the men I know that are older are trying to figure out what life looks like when they may not have their long-term partner around anymore, and they're used to having all their social activities and everything planned out for them. They're trying to figure out, oh God, I've got no friends. How do I find friends at my age? And they get into, and this is what we discussed, I know a lot of men of my age, they're just in a rut, and they're frankly not all that interesting. So and my female friends, I could hang out with them all day long. I just absolutely love them to bits. Like they make me smile. They make me laugh. They make me smile. I want to do stuff with them. But a lot of the guys I meet, I'm like, what are you bringing to the table exactly? Because you might be bringing sex, and I love that, and that's great. But what else are you bringing? Because my friends are bringing loads of stuff. They're making me feel great. And you're just telling me, oh, everything's a bit crap when you're not around. It's like, well, how's that interesting? I'm not your social secretary. So I think as an older woman, I feel very much like if I'm going to commit to a guy, like in a very serious way, he's just got to step up for me. And that doesn't mean he's got to be rich and handsome and this and that. He's not Prince Charming, but he has to be curious and fun. And he's got to be fairly self-sufficient. He's got to be able to look after himself, because I'm not his mother.
No, I agree with all of that 100%. I'm lucky that I have had long-term relationships where I have had that, I suppose I was married for 23 years, and I did have that safety, that protection, and that love within that relationship. Then I had another long-term relationship where I had lots of passion, lots of intimacy, very, very openly communicative, but the fantasies were kept between the two of us. We didn't sort of entertain anybody outside of our relationship, and the sex was very good, and it always was, as I say, filled with a lot of passion and intimacy. But that was based on the fact that we were totally trusted each other and had that communication, which I think is lacking in a lot of relationships, isn't it?
Oh, completely. And we get a lot of feedback from our TikTok channel from people who clearly are struggling within their relationships or who are trying to navigate this challenging period in many women's lives where they've been in a long-term relationship and the woman has now gone into menopause and maybe is finding that really difficult and doesn't have the same sexual desire, a bit like I did, and trying to work out, okay, what does the next stage of our relationship look like? And men really find that quite difficult because I think they do go through their own menopause, but in
Menopause.
menopause, right? In a slightly different way. And so and I certainly saw that in my last relationship, is that when my partner felt that his testosterone or something wasn't working quite as well as it had previously and had been, his hard-on was quite reliable and suddenly it wasn't, he really did struggle with that. He wondered, okay, does that make me any less masculine? He didn't feel as virile. So I think that long-term relationships can get quite difficult through this period of time. And sometimes starting a new relationship actually is just a lot easier because you didn't have all that stuff before. So you can just go into it as the new person that you now are, going, well, what I did in my 40s was what I did in my 40s. And now I'm in my 60s and here I am. And this is what I'm about. Are you into that? Yeah, that's cool. I like that. And then you can start afresh. So I can see how it can be, and really difficult to go through those very, very long relationships that many people are now having because of our aging and living longer.
Yeah. I mean, I was lucky, I'm 62 and I went through menopause in my early 50s, and I found, if anything, that my sex drive actually increased, and I didn't have any problems going through the menopause whatsoever, other than enjoying the fact that I didn't have to have to go through monthly periods anymore.
Well, you're really lucky because that was not my experience. And my mother also had some breast cancer. So going on HRT wasn't really an option for me. So I just had to get through it as I got through it. And it wasn't that great. But you know what? It's over now, pretty much over. So yeah. But I'm aware that it's very different for everybody. And for some reason, for some people, it is their libido increases, and for other people it just kind of disappears. And again, for some women, their libido disappearing is no big deal because maybe they weren't feeling like they ever really enjoyed sex. If they've never really been with a partner that was valued their own sexual pleasure, then perhaps sex was just a responsibility. And I've spoken to lots of women like that who are just, I'm so glad to be over it. I'm just really happy. My libido's dead. I never really liked sex anyway. Now I don't have to have kids. Now I don't have to think about it. Let's think about something else. Move on, and that's okay. That's okay.
Of course. It is what it is for some people. I think for me, I was quite lucky in that I'd ended my marriage with my ex-husband, and I was starting in a new relationship. So I think it just coincided, that I was going through the menopause at the same time as starting this exciting new, relationship, which obviously I suppose helped then for me discover a side to myself that I hadn't really explored before. So that was all good for me.
Yeah, and that sounds and similar, in a similar way to me, when you have a new partner with whom you can have that open, honest, trusting relationship and wants to help broaden your sexual buffet, whatever you want to call it, at a time where things are changing for you. Sometimes it can escalate all of that, right?
Reignite it all. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's amazing and awesome. But I do think new relationships give you the opportunity to not have to repeat the mistakes that we made in earlier ones. And I know that's certainly true for the two of us, is that I know that being really honest about how I am, what I like, what turns me on, and him feeling liberated from having to disguise the fact that he's swiping right or left or whatever. It's like, swipe away, mate. Do whatever you want. Just go for it.
Okay, well, I'm pleased that you've got that sort of open relationship which works for you. So what do you think has been one of your most popular episodes around sex advice for seniors?
Oh my God. Well, two things. On TikTok, definitely. What does the female orgasm feel like? Oh my God, that's gone mental. Because for me, I'm very clear about the fact that a clitoral orgasm is the one that's most closely aligned with a man's orgasm, and that all the other ones, all the other pleasant sensations and things, I don't really classify them as orgasms. I classify them as lovely feelings in different places. And other people, some people were, yep, totally agree with that. And some people like, no, vaginal orgasms exist, G-spot orgasms exist, blah, 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 blah. So that's been a really popular, very popular episode where lots of women have been weighing in on their own types of pleasure that they experience, and been really great to hear that, actually. And also, women that have not experienced anything, not so great to hear. And men saying, oh, well, it's a man's responsibility to do this anyway. And women shouldn't have to do this on their own, So, yeah, so that's been quite fun. And yeah, Peter did one about the P-spot, about the prostate. That was quite popular. And then people have just been enjoying the podcast just because they've never really heard two people in their 60s talking so openly about sex. And they just said it's a bit like being at a dinner party with your mates where you're just talking about this stuff, but you're not at a dinner party. You've just got your headphones on. So, yeah.
I think it's great. I think it's wonderful what you do. And I was so intrigued, by the subject of what you're covering on your podcast, and obviously we're both in a similar age range, and I thought I've got to get one of you or even both of you on to the Hearts Entwined to talk about what you do, because I absolutely love it, really appreciate, and I think you're offering a very valuable service to seniors.
Yeah, I mean, we've both been surprised today. This week, we released one, which I thought was quite contentious, which was a woman I know who works is a nurse in care homes on the weekends. And she's fronting this thing she calls Jackie's Revolution. And it's really about enabling people to be able to live independently for as long as possible and to avoid having to go into social care and that kind of institutionalized environment. And one of the things we talked about was intimacy in care home settings and how challenging it can be if you've got cognitive decline and you're in a care home to navigate what's appropriate or inappropriate as far as intimacy goes, and how many people who end up in those places have no cognitive problems whatsoever. They just might have some mobility issues, but they still have sexual desires, and they're basically neutered within care, and how staff within those places aren't really trained to deal with any of this. And Peter posted it up on Facebook, and two people said they work with commissioners who deal with care homes. How can we address these issues? And I just thought, bloody hell, like, people, if we can actually create change, social change in that way, where we get people to recognize some of the problems that exist around intimacy in later life, and how people just aren't talking, dealing with it, addressing it, learning about it, and all of that without feeling ashamed, how amazing would that be?
Yeah, it would be really amazing. And I think shame is a big one, isn't it? Whether it's wanting to explore fantasies or wanting to be open about what you've previously done sexually. I think shame stops a lot of people from doing a lot of things.
And also, what we recognize as well is that it starts even from people being unfamiliar with what happens with your body, and then going, I had a conversation with my friend the other day about lubricant, who said, Doesn't mean I can't be spontaneous now because I don't get as juicy. And I'm like, honestly, like, lube is there to help us all, right? You can use lubricant. There's no shame attached to lubricant, right? There's no shame attached to men taking Viagra if they need a bit of help. Like, we have to stop thinking that any of this stuff that's there to help us at this time of our life where we might need a little bit of extra help means we're inadequate. We're not inadequate. We just need a bit of extra help. It doesn't, like, but if you've broken your leg and somebody says you need a crutch, do you say, no, I'm going to walk around with a broken leg? Screw you. I'm not going to use that. Well, sometimes you just need a bit of help. Right?
Absolutely. 100% agree with that. So before we finish recording, Suzanne, what's your best contact information for any listeners that would like to get in touch with you?
So we have a contact form on our podcast, which is sexadviceforseniors.com, that you can go, or on TikTok, which is the same, Sex Advice for Seniors. You can message us.
Excellent.
And you can subscribe and you can follow us and you can do all those lovely things that would show us lots of love, and we would appreciate it.
Thank you so much. So before we wrap up the episode, any final words of wisdom around sex advice for seniors that you'd like to leave the audience with?
Sex doesn't stop at 60. You can have sex for the rest of your life. So carry on exploring all the pleasure that sex can bring you, because it's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful thing.
I can vouch for that. My one of my grandmas, on my father's side, she got remarried at the age of 77, and I know that she had an active sex life, well past that age. So I can definitely say that, it doesn't need to end at any time, unless you want it to, of course. But that's obviously up to the individual.
Absolutely. And it's been so lovely to talk to you, Lyn.
Thank you very much. And I'm just going to leave the listeners with true love starts with opening our hearts. And until next time, goodbye for now. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Hearts Entwined podcast. You can follow Lyn via the Facebook group Two Hearts Entwined, or search Lyn Smith, inspirational speaker, at LinkedIn, or email lyn@hearts-entwined.com. That's LYN@hearts-entwined.com. Remember, true love starts with opening our hearts.